Ako, Serengeti, late afternoon. The air is heavy with heat, the grass standing dry and brittle after weeks without rain. Elias moves slowly across the open plain, scanning the patterned horizon for movement. A flash of pale fur catches his eye. Not the fluid stride of a healthy animal, but a stillness that draws him closer. Lying half hidden in the shadow of a low acacia, a lion cub rests on its side, ribs lifting with shallow effort. Its eyes are barely open, the pupils dull and unresponsive to the light. He kneels at a distance, measuring each breath. The cub's flanks contract unevenly, a soft wheeze escaping with every exhale. Around its muzzle, the fur is stiff with dried saliva, and the skin beneath looks parched. Flies cluster at the corners of its mouth and over the small cuts along its nose. When Elias shifts his weight, the cub stirs, a slow, uncertain movement, and tries to lift its head. The attempt lasts only a second before it falls back into the dust. The ground under Elias's boots is warm even in the shade, the heat radiating upward. The air smells of dry soil and the faint musk of big cats, a reminder that the pride may not be far. His eyes sweep the horizon. No shapes in the grass, no signs of movement except the wind bending the taller stems. The cub remains exposed, with no cover that would shield it through the night. If it stays here, its condition will worsen quickly. A gust lifts the dry grass brushing over the cub's narrow body. Its tail twitches once, then stills. Elias notes the jut of its shoulder blades, the way the fur hangs loose over its frame. In the wild, weight loss at this stage means energy reserves are gone. Without water and food soon, it will not recover. He shifts closer, keeping his movement steady, his shadow falling across the cub's flank. The eyes open a fraction more. But there's no focus in the gaze. He lowers himself onto one knee, the leather of his gloves creaking softly. "Easy now," he says quietly, letting the sound of his voice settle into the air. The cub does not move away. Its breathing continues in the same shallow rhythm, each inhale barely drawing enough air. Elias reaches out, stopping just short of contact, watching for any sign of alarm. There is none, only the slow rise and fall of its side. In the distance, a bird calls over the plain, the note carrying far in the stillness. The moment stretches, measured by the cub's labored breaths. Elias knows the heat will drop quickly when the sun goes down, the night bringing cold that the cub's body cannot fight. The risks are plain. Alone, it will be too weak to defend itself. Without shade, it will dehydrate further. Without its pride, there will be no feeding. If it remains here, it will not survive the night. He shifts to get a better angle, checking the ground for signs of tracks or struggle. The soil shows only shallow impressions. No recent lion prints nearby, no scuffle marks that would suggest a fight. It is possible the pride moved on, leaving the cub behind when it could not keep pace. In such cases, survival depends entirely on the speed and care of human intervention. Elias steadies himself, the decision forming as naturally as a breath. The cub stirs again, this time opening its mouth slightly, a faint rasp escaping before it settles back. The sound is small, but it breaks the stillness between them. Elias leans closer, the sun lowering behind him, stretching his shadow across the brittle grass. He knows that any action must be careful, deliberate. Too sudden, and the cub could injure itself. Too slow, and the window for help will close. In the fading light, the horizon begins to soften, the glare easing from the grass tops. The cub's body lies as it did when he first saw it. Only the faintest flicker of breath proving life still holds. Elias studies its form one last time from where he kneels, understanding that this is the point where choice becomes action. The plain stays quiet, the weight of the moment carried only in the still air and the fragile body before him. Elias stays low to the ground, the dry scent of dust rising as his boots press into the brittle grass. From a few paces away, he can see the details more clearly now. The fine fur around the cub's muzzle is stiff with dried saliva, and a pale crust runs along the corners of its mouth. The skin beneath looks cracked. Flies land there in quick bursts, undisturbed by the cub's weakness. Its eyes half close again, the lids fluttering as if even that effort takes too much from it. He watches the narrow rise and fall of its ribs, each breath uneven, sometimes catching as though the lungs cannot fully expand. Moving slowly, he slips off a glove and presses 2 fingers gently along the inside of the foreleg. The pulse is faint and slow, its rhythm unsteady under the thin skin. In the heat of the Serengeti afternoon, every second without water is drawing the cub closer to collapse. The cub makes a small movement, an attempt to lift its head. The neck muscles tremble with the strain, the effort lasting no more than a heartbeat before it sinks back into the dust. The exhale that follows is shallow, carrying no force. Elias glances toward the horizon again, scanning for the outline of the pride. There is nothing, only the shimmer of heat rising from the open plain. Without the pride's protection and feeding, a cub this age cannot survive more than a day or 2 on its own. The air is still except for a soft, warm breeze pushing through the dry grass. The sound is faint, almost swallowed by the emptiness around them. Elias's gaze drops back to the cub. Its flanks move slowly now, as though each breath is being rationed. The fur is dusty, the paws dry and rough where they should still be soft. In its condition, even a short walk to shade could tip the balance toward exhaustion. He reaches for the canteen at his side and unscrews the lid, tilting it slightly so the scent of fresh water carries. The cub stirs, opening its eyes to a thin slit. The head shifts but doesn't rise, the body too depleted to answer its own needs. Elias knows the risks. If the cub overheats further, organ failure will follow. If it drinks too quickly, it could choke or worsen its state. Intervention must be measured, paced to the limits of what the body can manage. The sun edges lower, but the heat still presses down, heavy on skin and earth alike. Elias slides one knee forward, closing the distance by half, his movements as deliberate as the steady ticking of a clock. "Easy," he murmurs, his voice a low thread in the quiet. The cub's eyes open a little wider, holding on him for a moment before slipping closed again. It does not flinch or move away. The energy for fear is gone. A pair of doves passes overhead, their wings cutting briefly through the stillness. Elias lets the sound fade before he leans back slightly, assessing again. Without water soon, dehydration will advance past recovery. Without shade, the core temperature will rise beyond control. Both are hours away, not days. His gaze shifts to the small patch of shadow cast by the acacia tree, barely enough to cool the ground beneath it, but still more relief than this open patch of brittle grass. The cub remains where it fell, the shallow rhythm of its breathing the only sign that it is still holding on. Elias stays crouched, feeling the pull of urgency against the restraint required to keep the cub calm. In the open Serengeti light, the moment feels suspended, a balance between stillness and the first necessary move. Elias shifts forward, planting one knee into the warm dust. The cub lies where it has fallen, legs folded awkwardly beneath its narrow frame. He studies its breathing once more, judging whether the move will push it beyond its remaining strength. The air feels heavier now, the sun pressing down from above, heat radiating upward from the ground. Every moment here drains more from the small body in front of him. With a slow, measured motion, he slides one arm under the cub's chest, the other beneath its hindquarters. The fur is warm, almost hot to the touch, the skin beneath loose over bone. As his hands take the weight, the cub stirs faintly, a soft sound rising from its throat. Not a growl, not a cry, but something small and thin, quickly fading. It does not struggle or pull away. Its head rests limply against his forearm. He rises in one smooth movement, careful to keep the cub level. The weight in his arms is startling, lighter than it should be for its age, as though most of what should be there has already been taken by hunger and heat. Its paws dangle, claws catching lightly on the fabric of his shirt. But there is no real grip. Elias adjusts his hold so that the cub's body is supported along its length, the spine straight, the head resting where the motion will be least felt. The walk back to the vehicle is slow. Each step is placed with precision, avoiding stones, dips, and the snaring edges of brittle grass that could jar the cub's fragile body. Heat radiates from the plane, rising in ripples that bend the air. Sweat gathers beneath the brim of his hat, running down his neck in thin streams, but his focus stays on the small rise and fall of the cub's ribs against his chest. If its breathing falters now, there will be no time to reverse it. A locust rises from the grass ahead, snapping the silence for a moment before the stillness returns. Elias shifts the cub slightly, feeling for any sign of resistance. There is none, only the faint press of its rib cage against his arm. The scent of dry earth mixes with the musky tang of lion fur, both carried on the heavy air. He counts his steps, not in number, but in distance to the shaded ridge where the vehicle waits. When the first shadow falls across them, it is thin, stretched by the lowering sun. The relief is minor, but Elias feels the difference in the cub's body, a tiny easing in the heat beneath the fur. His own breathing is steady, measured to match the care of each movement. The vehicle comes into view between two low thorn bushes, its metal frame dulled by dust. He reaches it without pause, lowering the cub onto a folded canvas at the back. The small body sinks into the material, legs folding as before. Elias steps back, watching for any change. The cub's eyes open halfway, unfocused, then close again. Its chest rises once, shallow, then again. The journey from shade to shade has survived, but the hours ahead will decide if the effort was enough. The outpost sits low against the edge of the plain, a scattering of weathered structures pressed close to a line of thorn trees. By the time Elias eases the vehicle to a stop, the sun has begun to dip, softening the glare but leaving the heat clinging in the still air. He steps down carefully, lifting the cub once more. Feeling the slack weight in his arms. Its head lolls slightly, the fur along its neck damp where sweat from his shirt has touched it. He carries it to the open shade beneath a stretched canvas awning, lowering it onto a folded tarp laid across the packed earth. The shadow here is deeper, the air cooler by a degree or two, but the heat stored in the cub's body is slow to fade. Its sides move in uneven rhythm, the breaths shallow but consistent. Elias crouches nearby, unscrewing the lid of his canteen and pouring water into a shallow metal dish. The scent reaches the cub almost immediately. One eye opens, a faint glimmer catching the light, and its nose shifts toward the sound of the water settling in the dish. Elias slides it closer, letting the edge rest just beside the cub's foreleg. For a moment it sniffs, the nostrils flaring slightly. But when the cool surface touches its whiskers, it turns its head away, eyes closing again. The effort seems to take what little energy it had found. He waits, allowing the quiet to settle around them. In the distance, a dove calls from the thorn line, the sound carrying over the still ground. The shade holds steady, but Elias knows the night will bring a new set of risks. The drop in temperature will pull hard against the cub's already thin reserves. Without water soon, dehydration will deepen past the point where food or warmth can help. He wets his fingers in the dish and lets the droplets fall gently along the cub's muzzle. A few cling to the fur, sliding slowly toward its mouth. There is no reaction beyond the slow rise and fall of breath. The paws are tucked under its chest, claws resting against the tarp without tension. Elias studies the faint tremor in its flank, the sign of a body working against its own limits. From inside the outpost, the quiet hum of a generator starts up, a reminder of the narrow bubble of human presence in the vast plain beyond. Elias shifts the dish again, tilting it so the light catches the water, hoping the movement will draw another sniff. This time the cub opens its eyes slightly, lowering its chin toward the rim. The tongue flicks once, touching the surface, then retreats. It is not enough. Elias sits back, resting his forearms on his knees, and watches. The shadows under the awning deepen as the sun sinks further, the edges of the plain fading into muted gold. If the cub does not drink before nightfall, its body will continue to dry from within, the strain on its organs climbing with every hour. Out here, recovery depends on the smallest choices made in time. The cub shifts its weight, pressing its shoulder into the tarp. Its breathing has steadied fractionally, but the gap between each inhale remains long. Elias leaves the dish where it is, close enough to reach when instinct or need stirs. The quiet holds between them, marked only by the hum of the generator and the faint rhythmic breath of a life still balanced on the edge. The light has thinned to a warm, amber wash when Elias notices movement beyond the edge of the outpost. At first, it is only the faint sway of the thorn branches along the perimeter, as if stirred by a breeze that does not touch the air around him. Then, between the wire strands of the outer fence, a shape forms, tall, still, and watching. A lioness stands there, her body angled toward the shade where the cub lies. Dust clings to her flanks, the pale tan dulled by travel. Her ribs show in soft ridges beneath the skin, and the muscles along her shoulders shift slightly as she breathes. The fur around her face is darker from the day's heat, and her eyes are fixed on the small figure beneath the awning. She does not move forward, does not pace. She simply stands, her focus unbroken. Elias straightens slowly, keeping his hands clear of any quick movement. The distance between them is no more than 20 meters, divided by 2 strands of wire and the narrow buffer of hard earth. Her ears tip forward when his shape changes in her line of sight, but she does not shift her gaze from the cub. It is the stillness that tells him the most. She is not here to feed, not here by chance. She has followed something she knows. The cub stirs faintly, a slow turn of its head toward the open air. Its eyes open wider than they have in hours, and a thin sound escapes, low and almost voiceless. The lioness' ears lift higher, the muscles in her neck tightening for an instant before settling again. Elias watches her posture. No crouch, no tension in the legs, and feels the shape of the truth form. This may be the mother, drawn here by the scent carried on wind and dust from where he found the cub. The sun slips lower, casting longer shadows across the ground. Between them lies the fence. A thin line against the plain, but not enough to hide the weight of what hangs in the air. Elias knows that if she is the mother, leaving the cub alone here would mean keeping them apart in the last hours. It may have strength, yet returning it without caution could endanger both. The lioness shifts her weight once, the movement slow, and lowers her head slightly. Her gaze does not break. The dust at her paws lifts faintly as the evening air cools. She has the lean look of days without a full hunt, but the way she stands is not driven by hunger. She is waiting, patient but intent, as if the cub's presence is the only thing holding her there. Elias glances down at the tarp. The cub's eyes remain open, fixed toward the fence. Its breathing quickens by a small measure, a faint tremor visible along its side. If this connection is real, denying it could drain what will remain. He studies the space between them, measuring the ground, the wire, the distance to the open clearing beyond. In the fading light, the fence catches a thin gleam, the metal glowing briefly before the shadow overtakes it. The lioness does not leave. Elias understands now that whatever choice comes next will need to be made before the last of the sun disappears. The air between them holds still, carrying only the scent of dust, dry grass, and the unspoken pull of a bond that has crossed the open plain to find its way here. Elias waits until the last light begins to flatten across the plain before moving. The lioness is still at the fence, her outline steady against the dimming sky. The cub has not taken its eyes from her since she appeared, its breaths shallow but more frequent now, as if the sight alone has stirred something. Elias knows the risk of keeping them apart as the night draws in. He also knows that bringing them together must be done slowly, without tension. He crouches beside the tarp and slides his arms under the cub once more. The body feels the same as before. Light, warm from the day's heat, fragile in a way that makes every step deliberate. The cub gives no protest, only a faint shiver as he rises. He crosses the short distance to the gate in the perimeter, the metal cool beneath his hand as he unfastens it. Beyond the fence, the ground opens into a flat clearing edged by low grass. Elias steps through, the dry earth crunching under his boots. The lioness shifts her weight for the first time, lowering her head and taking 2 slow steps forward. Her ears are pricked, eyes locked on the small form in his arms. She makes no sound, but the air between them feels taut with her focus. Elias lowers himself to one knee and sets the cub gently onto the ground. Its legs fold beneath it, head resting sideways in the dust. The lioness closes the remaining distance in a silent, fluid movement, her paws leaving shallow prints in the earth. When she reaches the cub, she lowers her muzzle, touching it softly to its side. The contact is brief but deliberate, a silent recognition. She sinks down beside it, folding her legs so that her body forms a loose curve around the cub's. Her head hovers over its neck, and she begins to lick slowly along the dusty fur, each stroke unhurried. The cub's sides continue their faint, steady rhythm, no faster than before, but no weaker either. Elias watches from a few meters away, his hands still and open at his sides. The plain around them grows quieter as the sun dips lower, the sharp calls of daybirds giving way to the softer tones of evening. The air cools, lifting some of the weight from the ground. Elias knows the cub's survival now depends less on human care and more on the presence of the one creature that can keep it warm through the night and encourage it to feed when it can. The lioness pauses, lifting her head to glance toward him once. Her gaze holds for a moment, steady, unblinking, then returns to the cub. She curls her tail slightly forward, resting it along the small body. The gesture is instinct, not ceremony, but it carries the quiet assurance of protection. Elias remains still, letting the scene hold without interruption. If the cub can stay with her, there is a chance, one built not on intervention alone, but on the bond that survives even when strength fails. The light fades to the thin blue of early night, the 2 shapes pressed close together against the open plain. The lioness keeps her body curved around the cub, her flank rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Her tongue moves slowly over the cub's face, then along the back of its neck, each pass deliberate and unbroken. The dust on its fur begins to darken where it's dampened, and the faint crust along its muzzle softens under the attention. The cub makes no effort to move, its head resting in the shallow hollow between her forelegs. Elias steps back, giving them space, the dry earth crunching softly beneath his boots. The lioness lifts her head briefly, tracking the sound, but makes no move to follow. Her attention returns almost immediately to the cub. The air has cooled slightly, the heat of the day sinking into the ground, but the plain remains open and exposed. Long shadows stretch out from the low thorn trees, crossing the clearing in dark bands. The minutes settle into a still pattern, the lioness licking, the cub breathing, the horizon slowly dimming. Elias watches the sky for signs of approaching night predators. This is the hour when movement begins at the edges of the plain, when jackals stir and hyenas start their low calls. If the cub cannot stand before the sun drops, its vulnerability will draw attention from far more than its mother. The lioness shifts her position once, moving her body closer until she is almost lying over the cub. Her foreleg rests gently across its back, the weight slight but grounding. The cub's breathing has steadied but remains shallow. From where he stands, Elias can see the small pulse at the base of its ear, faint but constant. He notes the way the lioness tilts her head to check its face between licks, the way her ears flick in slow response to distant sounds. A breeze moves through the grass at the far edge of the clearing, carrying the dry scent of earth and the faint musk of other animals. The lioness lifts her head to test the air, her nose twitching once before lowering it again. The cub stirs faintly under her touch, a twitch in its hind leg that fades as quickly as it came. Elias counts the minutes in the changing light. The sun dips lower, flattening against the horizon, and the shadow line begins to overtake the last of the sunlit grass. He knows the window is narrowing. Once the light is gone, any movement from predators will be harder to detect, and the open ground here offers no cover. The cub's best defense will be its mother's strength, and for that, it needs to be close enough to follow her if she moves. The lioness makes a low, almost inaudible sound, pressing her muzzle briefly against the cub's side. Her tail flicks once, then stills. She does not shift from her place even as the dark bands of shadow grow wider, stretching into the clearing. The air holds a thin, rising coolness, the kind that settles quickly after sunset. Elias keeps his place, hands loose at his sides, his weight balanced to move if needed. The plane remains quiet for now, but the stillness feels like it's holding its breath. The moment stretches, each slow beat of time carrying them closer to the line where light gives way completely. If the cub cannot stand before then, the night will not wait. The last edge of the sun slips beneath the horizon, leaving the plain in a wash of muted gold and gathering shadow. The heat that pressed all afternoon begins to ease, replaced by a slow, rising coolness. The lioness shifts, lifting her head from the cub's small frame. She leans forward and presses her muzzle gently into its shoulder. The cub blinks at the contact, ears flicking once, then tries to stretch a foreleg forward. The movement is unsteady and brief, and it folds back down into the dust. The lioness does not give up. She nudges again, this time against the cub's flank, stepping back half a pace to give it room. Her tail sways in a single arc, a quiet gesture of insistence. The cub gathers its strength and pushes to its feet. Its legs tremble under the weight, joints loose from hours of stillness. It sways forward, catching itself against her foreleg, the contact holding it upright. She stays perfectly still, head lowered, eyes fixed on its face as if measuring how much more it can give. Elias stands a few meters away, his silhouette drawn long by the fading light. He can see each tremor in the cub's legs, the shallow pant of its breath, the way the lioness holds herself close enough to steady it without pressing. The cub takes a single step, then another, both slow and deliberate. The lioness matches the movement, shortening her stride until her shoulder remains just ahead of the cub's own. Together, they face the open stretch that leads to the far edge of the clearing. Beyond that lies the cover of tall grass, where the night will hide them. They move only a few paces before stopping. The cub leans into her leg, sides lifting quickly with the effort. The air has cooled enough to feel thin against the skin, and the first threads of evening sound begin to pull across the plain. The call of a nightjar, somewhere beyond the thorn line, the low murmur of wind stirring in the grass. The lioness waits without impatience. She stands steady until the cub's breathing slows, then lowers her head to give another nudge. This time, the cub responds sooner, lifting its head and stepping forward again. Elias keeps his focus on them, aware of the hour. Once the last light fades, the predators that hunt the open will begin their search. A hyena's call carries from far off, high and broken, quickly swallowed by distance. The lioness's ears turn toward the sound, but her body does not shift. She walks on, guiding the cub with a gentle press of her flank. Each step is deliberate, and the cub follows closely, its shoulder brushing her front leg, the connection keeping it steady. The grass at the edge of the clearing ripples in the growing wind. their stalks bending in slow unison. The cub stumbles once, catching itself against her before straightening again. The lioness pauses, giving it a moment, and scans the open plain with calm, deliberate movements of her head. Only when the cub shifts forward on its own does she begin walking again. The two shapes move together, never more than a breath apart. Elias does not follow. His place is here, letting the pair close the space between themselves and the safety of the grass without the press of his presence. He watches the distance shrink, from meters to steps, from steps to the final stretch where the taller grass leans over like a low curtain. The cub disappears first, its small frame swallowed by the cover. A moment later, the curve of the lioness's back slips into the same shelter. For a few seconds, the tops of the grass sway where they passed. Then the movement fades, leaving the clearing bare in the cooling air. The sky above has deepened into a muted blue, the first stars beginning to show at the farthest edge. Elias remains still, the last image fixed in his mind, the slow, steady walk of mother and cub into the fading light. The plain is quiet now, the calls of day fully replaced by the subtle stirrings of night. A faint breeze crosses the open ground, bringing with it the dry scent of grass and earth. Elias turns toward the outpost, the empty space between here and the thorn line stretching wide under the darkening sky. Behind him, somewhere beyond the reach of sight, the lioness will keep the cub pressed against her through the night, their shapes hidden in the tall grass while the wind moves softly over the plain.